Hello and welcome from a very special video. This kind of grew out of the controversy over the recent Unbowed, Unbent, Unbroken and its ending. I was up very late watching it explode on Twitter, got into some very long discussions, maybe arguments about it, and it was suggested by Angry God Fan that we do a 10-minute video kind of commenting on this scene, and he's going to do a 10-minute video. We'll both put them up at the same time, and his position obviously is very negative on it. Ours is not entirely happy, that's the thing. But on the other hand, we have issues with some of the criticisms aimed at the show for doing this. So we'll want to discuss in general those critiques. But in general, I would say we have misgivings, but they're different.
They are story construction misgivings. They are about the fact that Sansa is in this place in the first place.
Yeah.
Having her take the role of Jane Poole in the novels. We mentioned this in our main video for Unbowed, Unbent, Unbroken, that we felt they had to jump to some major hoops and have Littlefinger act quite stupid and generally twist things a lot to get Sansa to be in this position in Winterfell. That said, now that she's there, now that she's taking Jane Poole's place, for her to not suffer the same fate as Jane Poole, we felt would have been very false to the novels, to that character, to how George writes these things. He doesn't shy away from the brutalities of, and we're going to be careful here and not say, a realistic medieval setting, because it isn't all about that, the fact that it's medieval. It is humanity in general, and, past, present, and probably future. Violence, and yes, sexual violence, is a part of what humans perpetrate and what happens to humans. We feel that authors have maybe not a responsibility, but certainly a right to depict these things. To criticize an author simply for including such material in the work, we feel is entirely wrong. It's all about how they do it.
Yeah. So we'll cover point by point our views on sort of answer some of the critiques that we've seen that we disagree with. Only for shock value is an argument that I understand the misgivings. We have shared our misgivings about how they've dealt with violence and sexuality, how they've turned certain things into big shocking moments, and that's all the people remember about them. I absolutely understand the misgiving. On the other hand, the fact is that this is something that they've chosen that is based on the novels. It is there in the books, not with Sansa, but with a different character. Reek is a witness to it. People, would they say if it was Jane Poole, would they say, oh, it's only there for shock value? I understand if you would argue that George is doing something wrong, and so that they are doing something wrong and following him. But if you think it's fine in the novel for Ramsay's bride to be brutalized and raped, it's hard to argue that it's only for shock value on the show. Most of all, the most important thing is we don't know how it will play out, and I think it's very important to see if it was just a shocker or if it's something deeper and that will have a lasting impact.
The other criticism is, well, it's Sansa. People are going to react very strongly to that. And this is true. People are going to feel more invested in a primary character that has been with you the whole series. However, what George does in the novel by having it happen to Jane Poole, who is Sansa's friend, but we've, seen very little of her, especially since Game of Thrones. He is asking you to sympathize with somebody who has been featured very little. We're only seeing her through Rick's perspective, and yet he expects the reader to be able to invest emotion in her and to see her plight. So the idea that it's fine when it's a lesser character and not fine when it's Sansa seems to suggest that you're not investing enough in that minor character and somehow putting the major characters on a pedestal just because they are, because you feel more for them. And I think that's a very hollow argument which doesn't really ring true to the way George writes things.
For many, it's the objection between Sansa being a victim before and now being what they see as a player, that she's actually having power and control and now going back to a victim again. This presupposes that you know exactly what will happen in Book 6 and 7. This presupposes that Sansa will be a player with a straight uphill trajectory from here on up, that she'll just climb and climb and climb and not have any adversity or any situation of victimization. The fact is, those who see her as just a player kind of ignore the fact that she is, at present, Littlefinger's puppet, basically. She's doing things, learning things, but at his direction and in how he wants. We all imagine we know how this will eventually play out, but that's just our imagination. I don't expect that she will be raped in the novels. I absolutely, I don't think that's going to happen. But that she's going to be always the player and never a victim, I don't know. I don't know that that's the case for anyone in the novels. So it seems to me that people have to kind of wait and see a lot about it rather than just deciding that they've made some massive, irrevocable change that will keep her victimized forever and ever and ever.
It's all about Theon's pain, is another criticism that has been put forward. And it assumes, I think partially because it has to do with the closing on Theon's face, and also I think has to do with people perceiving Theon as a shallow individual. In the books it is clearer. The chapter is from Theon's point of view, but we see clearly that he's horrified, both for his own sake and for Jaime's sake. In the here on the show, they are showing the whole sort of chapter up until this point from Sansa's perspective, but during the rape itself, it cuts to show Theon's face. In part, I think it is because they were concerned that actually showing Sansa's face would be much too hard for anyone to stomach, having that on screen. On the other hand, when they go in on Theon's face, I can understand why some people make the mistake of reading this as making it all about Theon. I think it's a shorthand of showing the pain of two of Ramsay's sexual abuse victims in one. I mean, Theon being castrated by Ramsay has to be considered sexual violence and sexual abuse as well. And I think it's also, really doing Theon a disservice to not imagine that he's feeling for Sansa in this situation.
Last, definitely not least, this is the one actually that started the whole discussion on Twitter. The argument that rape is being used on the show, in this case, as a plot device. I understand. Again, this kind of ties into the shock value, I guess, that people are very concerned about. It's just a thing they toss out there for the sake of moving the plot forward without any real thought or depth of feeling about what they're doing. I think, again, I can understand the misgivings because of some of the past stuff, but I don't think this is fair. First off, plot device. What is a plot device? It is something you use to advance the plot. Any action that causes a reaction on a character, anything that leads to a forward momentum in the narrative is a plot device. Jaime having his hand chopped off is a plot device. Theon being tortured and castrated is a plot device. This doesn't make these things bad or false or wrong. A rape of a character is not in itself a plot device. It's all about how you use it. We are still early days yet. We don't know how we're going to fully use it. The preview kind of makes it quite plain that Sansa doesn't just bounce away from this, that Theon doesn't just bounce away from this. This has real, meaningful, an effect on them, as it should. And I know that people got really upset about how the whole Jaime Cersei situation came out last season, where they failed in editing and directing that correctly, and something they wanted to be ambiguous became something they didn't intend. As Nikolai Coster-Waldau and Lena Headey tried to tell people. But the fact is that was just a mistake of they were too close to it and didn't see what they were doing. They didn't intend to rape. It came out that way to many people, but it wasn't their intention. Here, their intent is clear. This is a brutal moment. They do not shy away from it, but they treat it, I think, very seriously with the right decorum and weight. I really think that dismissing it as plot device is dismissing any action in a novel as a plot device, and it's just not a good argument. So in that, definitely just think again, anything that gets forward momentum, that moves the narrative, that has an effect, is a device. They come out, writers create them. They choose to make them. If it's okay for George to use it, it has to be okay for David and Dan to use it.